The source wall trembled, not from the imprisoned cosmic beings struggling against their eternal prison at reality's edge, not from the whispers of the anti-life equation that Darkseid endlessly sought. The trembling came from something older, something that predated even the new god's ascension, from the ruins of the old gods. It came from the breach between worlds, wound in the multiverse, where Norse magic had collided with Motherbox technology, where desperation and divine power had torn open a pathway that should not exist. Kratos fell through fire. The boom tube spat him onto Apocalypse during the planet's eternal twilight, where the sky burned red with industrial hellfire, and the screams of the conquered echoed across fire pits that had consumed civilizations. He landed hard, cratering the obsidian platform where Parademon shock troops had been drilling. The Leviathan axe materialized in his right hand as instinct took over centuries of combat against gods and monsters, compressed into pure reaction. The blades of chaos ignited against his forearms, hellfire chains writhing with anticipation. The ghost of Sparta rose to his feet and surveyed a landscape that reminded him too much of Hades. Except this hell was ruled by something far more organized than Olympus's afterlife chaos. This was tyranny perfected. 50 parademons surrounded him within seconds. Their insectoid armor clicked and whirred as they leveled plasma weapons at the intruder who had violated Apocalypse's sovereign airspace. They didn't speak. Darkseid's shock troops had been stripped of language, reduced to obedient weapons. Kratos understood that kind of slavery. He'd served gods before learning to kill them. He didn't wait for them to fire. The Leviathan axe sang through the air, frost trailing its arc as it cleaved through 3 parademons before embedding itself in a 4th's chest cavity. Kratos was already moving, the blades of chaos spinning in deadly circles as he closed the gap. Hellfire met Parademon armor and found it insufficient. The creatures fell in pieces, their technology no match for weapons, forged in divine flames and quenched in god blood. More came. They always did. Kratos fought with the efficiency of someone who had battled his way out of the underworld multiple times. No wasted movement, no hesitation. The axe returned to his hand with a thought, and he hurled it again, each throw precisely calculated. The blades wrapped around a parademon's throat and yanked it into his rising knee. Bone and chitin shattered. Purple blood sprayed across obsidian stone. He lost count after the 30th kill. Numbers stopped matching when you'd slaughtered entire pantheons. The Parademon assault paused as something massive descended from the burning sky. A boom tube opened with a sound like reality being torn in half, and through it came a figure that made even the battle-hardened ghost of Sparta pause. The warrior stood 9 feet tall, his body covered in armor that seemed grown rather than forged, organic red and gold, plating that pulsed with barely contained rage. An omega symbol marked his chest. His eyes burned with the same righteous fury Kratos had once felt before rage consumed everything else. In his hands, he carried a sentient weapon, Astroforce, incarnate, that crackled with power. Kratos recognized as fundamentally different from Olympian or Norse divinity. "You fight well for a mortal," the warrior said, his voice carrying across the killing field. "But you stink of god murder." Kratos said nothing. He'd learned that actions spoke louder than words, especially when gods were involved. "I am Orion, son of Darkseid, champion of New Genesis," the warrior continued, landing with enough force to crack the obsidian beneath his boots. "You have invaded Apocalypse. You have slaughtered my father's soldiers. Identify yourself before I add your head to the fire pits." Kratos. The name came out like gravel, rough from decades of screaming rage and unspoken grief. "I serve no one." Orion's eyes narrowed, reading the scars that covered every inch of Kratos's gray skin, the ash of his murdered family permanently marking him. "Those are the marks of trauma and vengeance. I know them well." He gestured at the Parademon corpses. "But you fight with purpose beyond simple rage. You killed them efficiently, professionally, as if you've done this before." "I have killed gods," Kratos said flatly. "Your father's insects are nothing." The statement hung in the air between them like a thrown gauntlet. On Apocalypse, where Darkseid's word was absolute law, and even the concept of rebellion had been tortured out of most inhabitants. Such defiance was unthinkable. Orion's expression shifted from warrior's assessment to something more complex, respect mixed with concern. "You've killed gods," Orion repeated, tasting the words. "Which gods?" "All of them. Kratos's." Hands tightened on the blades of chaos. "Olympus burned. The Greek pantheon is ash. Ares, Athena, Poseidon, Hades, Zeus himself. I ended them all for what they did to mortals. For what they did to me." Orion took an involuntary step back. Even among new gods who had seen countless civilizations rise and fall, the complete eradication of an entire divine hierarchy was unprecedented. The source, the ultimate power from which all new gods drew their essence, whispered warnings in Orion's mind. This scarred warrior represented something the multiverse had perhaps never seen. A mortal who had ascended to godhood specifically to destroy gods. "Then you are either the greatest ally or the greatest threat the new gods have ever encountered," Orion said slowly. "And I must determine which before you leave this planet." Around them, the fire pits of apocalypse burned brighter, as if sensing the confrontation to come. In the distance, something massive moved through the industrial canyons, one of Darkseid's personal enforcers taking notice of the disturbance. The air itself seemed to compress under the weight of the Lord of Apocalypse's attention. Turning toward this new variable, Kratos raised the Leviathan axe and ignited the blades of chaos. He'd fought gods in their own domains before. He'd walked into Olympus and left it in ruins. If these new gods wanted to test him, he would show them what happened when divine arrogance met mortal determination, refined by centuries of god-killing. "Then test me," Kratos growled. "But know this, I have never knelt to gods. I will not start now." Orion smiled, and it was the grin of a warrior who had finally found a worthy opponent. "Good. I despise cowards. If you want to see more characters enter different universes, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character and the universe you'd want to see them in down in the comments below. Hope shines brightest in the darkest night. The two warriors circled each other on the obsidian killing ground as Apocalypse itself seemed to hold its breath. In the throne room miles away, Darkseid's eyes flickered with interest. A god-killer had arrived in his domain. The question was whether such a being could be broken to serve tyranny, or whether he would need to be destroyed before he inspired the one thing Apocalypse could not tolerate: hope. Orion moved first. The Astroforce erupted from his weapon in a column of golden-red energy that would have vaporized a city block. Kratos dove left, the blast scorching the air where he'd stood milliseconds before. The obsidian platform exploded into molten glass. The ghost of Sparta rolled to his feet and hurled the Leviathan axe in one fluid motion. Frost trailed behind the spinning blade as it cut through superheated air. Orion caught it. His hand closed around the weapon forged in the heart of Norse winter. And for a moment, surprise flickered across his features. The axe fought him. Kratos could feel it through their connection, the weapon recognizing only one master. Orion's fingers began to frost over, ice creeping up his armored forearm. He hurled the axe aside with a grunt, shaking sensation back into his hand. "Impressive," Orion admitted. "That weapon carries the cold of dying stars." Kratos didn't respond. The axe returned to his grip as he closed the distance. Blades of chaos spinning defensive patterns. Orion met him head-on, and when their weapons collided, the sound echoed across Apocalypse like a war drum. Astroforce met Hellfire. New god strength tested god-killer determination. They were evenly matched. Kratos had expected overwhelming power. Gods always assumed their divinity made them invincible. But Orion fought with technique honed across millennia, each strike precise and purposeful. More than that, he fought with the controlled fury of someone who understood rage's seduction and had learned to master it rather than be consumed. It reminded Kratos uncomfortably of himself centuries ago, before Sparta fell. "You fight like a soldier," Kratos observed between exchanges, his blades deflecting an Astroforce burst that would have taken his head. "Not like a god. I fight like someone raised in two worlds," Orion countered, his weapon transforming into a staff that he used to vault over Kratos's low sweep. "Born of tyranny, raised in light, forever caught between Apocalypse and New Genesis. between my father's darkness and Highfather's hope. The confession carried weight that Kratos recognized. He'd been caught between worlds too, mortal and god, father and monster, protector and destroyer. The difference was that Kratos had chosen to burn one world to reach the other. Orion seemed determined to bridge both. Your father, Kratos said, blocking a strike that sent shockwaves rippling through his arms. Darkseid, he rules here. Rules? Orion's laugh was bitter as he disengaged, creating space between them. He owns here. Every atom on Apocalypse exists only because Darkseid permits it. Every being serves his pursuit of the anti-life. Equation, the mathematical. Proof that free will is a lie and that subjugation is the universe's natural state. Kratos had heard similar philosophies from Zeus, from Odin, from every god who'd ever justified tyranny through divine right. Then he's no different from the gods I've killed. No, Orion agreed, his expression darkening. He's worse. The gods you destroyed were cruel, capricious, drunk on their own power. Darkseid is methodical, patient. He's been conquering worlds since before your universe had language. And unlike your Olympians, he cannot simply be killed. I've tried. The admission hung between them, and for the first time, Kratos saw not an opponent, but a kindred spirit, another son, trying to escape his father's shadow by destroying him. I was traded to New Genesis as an infant. Orion continued, his weapon lowering slightly. A peace treaty between worlds. Darkseid's son, raised by his greatest enemy, taught compassion and justice. They thought it would redeem me. Instead, it gave me the tools to fight him. His eyes burned brighter. But every battle, I feel his blood in my veins. His rage. His hunger for domination. I am my father's son, no matter how much New Genesis's light tries to burn it away. Kratos understood that burden intimately. Zeus's blood had given him power, but also the curse of becoming what he hated most. Before either could speak again, the sky tore open. 3 more boom tubes materialized around the platform, and through them came beings that made the parademons look like insects. Female warriors in armor that seemed forged from nightmare, Darkseid's elite. The Furies. Granny Goodness led them, her ancient face twisted in perpetual cruelty, flanked by Lashina with her electric whips and Mad Harriet with her razor claws. Behind them, something massive stirred in the industrial canyons. Kalibak, Darkseid's other son, the brutish enforcer who lacked Orion's complexity but possessed raw destructive power that had shattered planets. Lord Darkseid extends an invitation, Granny Goodness announced, her voice dripping false sweetness. The stranger who claims to have murdered gods will attend our master. Now, Kratos' response was to hurl the Leviathan, axe through Granny Goodness's shoulder. The ancient fury shrieked, more in outrage than pain, as frost spread from the wound. Lashina's whips cracked toward Kratos, lightning arcing between their lengths. He caught them on the blades of chaos. Hellfire meeting. Electricity in an explosion that sent both combatants skidding backward. Mad Harriet came from above, claws extended, howling with the enthusiasm of someone who'd broken psychologically. Centuries ago, Orion's Astroforce caught her mid-leap and slammed her into the obsidian with enough force to crater the platform further. I suppose diplomacy has failed, Orion said dryly, fighting beside Kratos now rather than against him. It always does with tyrants, Kratos replied. They moved in unison, God-killer and Godborn, united temporarily against Darkseid's forces. Kratos' centuries of combat experience meshed surprisingly well with Orion's tactical brilliance. Where Kratos provided brutal efficiency, Orion offered strategic precision. The Furies were formidable, each one powerful enough to subjugate lesser worlds. But they'd never faced an opponent who'd systematically dismantled divine hierarchies. Granny Goodness attempted to use her mother box technology to open a boom tube beneath Kratos, trying to dump him into Apocalypse's fire pits. He felt the dimensional tear beginning beneath his feet and launched himself upward, using Lashina's extended whip as a rope. The blades of chaos wrapped around her waist and yanked her into the boom tube instead. Her screams echoed from the fire pits below. Mad Harriet came again, and this time Kratos met her head-on. Her claws scraped against his forearms, the same arms that had climbed from the Underworld itself. He headbutted her hard enough to crack her helmet, then kicked her into Granny Goodness. Both collapsed in a tangle of cursing and armor. Then Calabac arrived. Darkseid's firstborn son crashed through an industrial spire, scattering metal and enslaved workers. He stood 12 feet tall, more beast than god. His beta club crackling with energy drawn from Apocalypse's core. Where Orion had inherited calculation from his father, Calabac had inherited only rage and brute strength amplified to cosmic levels. Father wants the stranger alive, Calabac roared, his voice shaking the platform. But he didn't say unbroken. He swung his beta club, and Kratos barely rolled aside as the weapon pulverized the ground where he'd stood. The shockwave alone sent him tumbling. Calabac was stronger than anything Kratos had fought since. Zeus himself, raw power that didn't require technique because it could simply overwhelm any defense. Orion intercepted his half-brother, Astroforce meeting Beta Club in an explosion that lit Apocalypse's perpetual twilight like a new sun. Calabac, stand down. This doesn't concern you. Everything concerns Darkseid, Calabac snarled, shoving Orion aside with contemptuous ease. And Father wants this god-killer. Kratos rose, breathing hard, assessing his opponent. Calabac's strength exceeded his own, a rare admission, even mentally. Direct confrontation would be suicide. But Kratos hadn't survived the Furies of Greece, the Valkyries of Norse myth, and countless divine champions by fighting fair. He threw the Leviathan axe not at Calabac, but at the industrial spire behind him. The weapon struck a support beam, and tons of metal and machinery collapsed onto Darkseid's son. Calabac roared, more annoyed than injured, but it bought seconds. Seconds were all Kratos needed. He sprinted toward the nearest boom tube, the one Granny Goodness had opened before he'd put an axe through her shoulder. It was beginning to close, the dimensional tear sealing itself. But Kratos had escaped collapsing portals before. He dove through just as Calabac's Beta Club smashed the ground behind him. Orion moved to follow, but hesitated. His duty to New Genesis demanded he capture the God-Killer for evaluation. His warrior's instinct told him Kratos represented something unprecedented, a mortal who'd achieved what new gods considered impossible. His buried connection to Darkseid's blood whispered that letting such a weapon escape was foolish. Let him go, Granny Goodness wheezed, pulling the axe from her shoulder with a sickening crack. The wound was already beginning to heal. But slowly, whatever divine power infused that weapon resisted even new god physiology. Lord Darkseid has seen enough. He knows what the stranger is, and he knows where he'll go. Where? Orion demanded. Granny Goodness smiled with too many teeth. To Earth, where all lost gods eventually wander. Where the Justice League makes its stand. Where Superman, that other hope god, will judge whether this God-Killer is savior or threat. Her smile widened. And where Lord Darkseid has already set plans in motion. The boom tube sealed completely, and Kratos was gone. Orion stood on the obsidian platform, surrounded by Apocalypse's industrial hellscape, and realized the game had shifted. Darkseid hadn't sent his forces to capture Kratos. He'd sent them to measure him, to see if a being who'd slaughtered pantheons could be turned, broken, or used. And in typical Darkseid fashion, he'd probably already calculated 7 different ways to accomplish all 3. Orion activated his own mother box, preparing to follow. If Kratos reached Earth unprepared, the Justice League would treat him as a threat. Superman would try to contain him through hope and overwhelming power. Batman would have 30 contingencies ready within hours. Wonder Woman would test him as a warrior. And in that chaos, Darkseid would strike. The ghost of Sparta had survived gods before, but he'd never faced gods who actually fought for mortals rather than against them. He'd never encountered beings like Superman, who wielded godlike power with human compassion, or Batman, who fought gods as a mortal and won through sheer determination. Most importantly, Kratos had never met someone like Diana of Themyscira, a warrior goddess who understood both the burden of divine power and the necessity of protecting those without it. If the meeting went wrong, Earth would burn. If it went right, Darkseid would face something he hadn't encountered in millennia, genuine uncertainty about the outcome. The boom tube deposited Kratos in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. He plunged through 50 feet of water before his boots struck Something solid. Not ocean floor, but metal. Ancient metal. That thrummed with power he recognized as fundamentally different from the chaotic technology of apocalypse. This was ordered, purposeful, built by a civilization that had understood the balance between mortality and divinity. Through the dark water, he could make out structures, temples, columns, architecture that reminded him of Greece, but older, untouched by Rome's conquest or time's decay. Atlantis. He swam upward, lungs burning despite his god-enhanced physiology. The surface broke around him in a spray of salt water, and Kratos gasped in air that tasted of brine and storm. Thunder rumbled overhead. Dark clouds gathered with unnatural speed, and lightning speared down toward the ocean with targeting precision that suggested intelligence. Behind the storm, a trident burst from the water beside him. The weapon gleamed gold and green, crackling with power that commanded the sea itself. Its wielder rose from the depths riding a wave that defied physics. A man in orange and green armor, his face weathered and regal, his eyes carrying the weight of ruling a kingdom that covered 2/3 of the planet. Blonde hair whipped around his face as the storm intensified at his unspoken command. You fall from the sky, crash into my ocean, and disturb Atlantis during treaty negotiations with the surface. Arthur Curry said, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to being obeyed by both humans and leviathans. I am Aquaman, king of the seven seas, and you will explain yourself before I decide whether to imprison you in the trench or simply let the Kraken have you. Kratos treaded water, assessing this new god, because whatever else he was, Aquaman commanded divine power over his domain. The Leviathan axe materialized in his hand, frost spreading across the ocean's surface in a 10-foot radius. Steam rose where ice met water. I seek no quarrel with you, Kratos said, his voice carrying over wind and wave. I was sent here by accident. A dimensional tear. I need to return to. You came through a boom tube. Aquaman interrupted, his eyes narrowing. I've fought Darkseid's parademons before. I know that signature. Which means, either you're one of his agents, or you've pissed him off badly enough that he's chasing you across dimensions. The trident lowered slightly, not quite hostile, but far from welcoming. Given the way you're carrying yourself, like a warrior who's fought his way out of Hades itself, I'm guessing the latter. The comparison to Hades was more accurate than Aquaman knew. Before Kratos could respond, 7 figures descended from the sky in formation. They moved with the coordinated precision of soldiers who'd fought together for years, each one representing power that would have made the Olympians pause. At their center flew a man in blue and red, a symbol on his chest that Kratos didn't recognize, but somehow understood represented hope itself. Beside him, a woman in armor that marked her as both warrior and royalty, golden lasso coiled at her hip. Behind them, a man encased entirely in cybernetic armor that pulsed with the same mother box technology Kratos had felt on Apocalypse. The Justice League had arrived. Superman descended slowly, hands raised in a gesture of peace, but Kratos noticed how he positioned himself between the stranger and Aquaman, protecting his ally even while attempting diplomacy. Up close, the Kryptonians' power was undeniable. Kratos had fought gods whose presence warped reality around them. Superman carried that same weight, but tempered with something Kratos hadn't expected, genuine concern in his eyes. I'm Superman, the blue-clad figure said, his voice carrying warmth that seemed incompatible with the godlike power radiating from him. This is Wonder Woman, Cyborg, Flash, Green Lantern, Martian Manhunter, and you've already met Aquaman. We detected the boom tube signature and came to investigate. He floated closer, scanning Kratos with vision that saw beyond normal perception. You're not from Apocalypse. Your energy signature is completely different. Divine, but older somehow. Where are you from? Greece, Kratos answered simply. Wonder Woman's reaction was immediate. She dropped from the sky to hover at Superman's shoulder, her dark eyes studying Kratos with an intensity that went beyond tactical assessment. Greece, as in the mortal nation, or Greece, as in the birthplace of the gods. Her hand moved unconsciously toward her lasso. Because your armor, your weapons, that ash covering your skin, I've seen similar markings in the old temples. You carry yourself like the warriors of ancient Sparta. I was Spartan, Kratos confirmed. before I became something else. The gods of Olympus are gone, Wonder Woman continued, her voice carrying a note of ancient grief. I am daughter of Hippolyta, blessed by the Olympians before they withdrew from the mortal world. I felt their passing decades ago. Ares, Hades, even Zeus himself. The divine realm went silent. She stepped closer, studying him with eyes that had seen millennia. What do you know of their fate? Kratos met her gaze without flinching. I killed them. All of them. The ocean itself seemed to still. Even the storm Aquaman had summoned paused, thunder rumbling uncertainly in the distance. The Justice League's formation shifted subtly, not quite hostile, but no longer simply investigative. Flash vibrated with nervous energy, ready to move at light speed. Green Lantern's ring glowed brighter, constructing defensive shields. Cyborg's arm transformed into a sonic cannon, though he didn't raise it yet. Superman's expression didn't change, but his eyes flickered with the red tint of heat vision held carefully in check. You're claiming you single-handedly destroyed the Greek pantheon? I am not claiming, Kratos said flatly. I am stating fact. Ares, god of war, died by my hand. Poseidon drowned in his own ocean. Hades was cast into the river Styx. Athena fell to betrayal. Zeus himself died on Olympus as the mountain crumbled around him. He paused, remembering. They were gods. They were also tyrants who treated mortals as playthings, who destroyed lives for their entertainment, who demanded worship through fear. I ended them. Wonder Woman's expression cycled through disbelief, horror, and something that might have been understanding. As an Amazon, she'd been raised to revere the Olympians. But she'd also lived long enough to see their cruelties, their petty jealousies, their willingness to sacrifice mortals for divine games. The gods were not perfect, she admitted slowly, but they were necessary. They maintained balance, protected humanity from threats beyond mortal comprehension. Without them, humanity survived, Kratos interrupted. They always do. Gods take credit for mortal resilience, then punish them when they don't need divine intervention. His grip tightened. On the Leviathan axe, I have seen what gods become when mortals give them too much power. I have been what gods become, and I chose to end that cycle, even if it meant destroying myself in the process. Except you didn't destroy yourself. Batman's voice came from the javelin, Seven hovering above them, his dark silhouette visible in the cockpit. Of course he'd been listening, analyzing, calculating. You survived your war against Olympus, which means either you're lying about killing Zeus, the king of gods, or you possess power that makes you one of the most dangerous beings on this planet. Batman, Superman said warningly, but the Dark Knight continued. I've already run analysis on his weapons and armor. That axe radiates temperatures below absolute zero. Those blades burn with hellfire that violates thermodynamic laws. His skin is covered in ash that registers as human remains, likely a family, based on the distribution pattern. Batman's voice carried no judgment, only cold assessment. He's a warrior who's been fighting for so long that he's forgotten how to be anything else, which makes him either an asset or a threat we need to contain immediately. Kratos' laugh was bitter and humorless. Your detective speaks truth. I am a weapon. I was forged by gods, sharpened by betrayal, and wielded against Olympus itself. If you see me as a threat, then you understand correctly. But you don't want to fight us, Martian Manhunter said quietly, his telepathic senses reading beyond words. I sense rage in you. Yes, oceans of it, enough to drown worlds. But also exhaustion, regret. You've been at war so long that you've forgotten what peace looks like. And when you look at us, you're not seeing enemies. You're seeing gods who might become what you've already destroyed. The Martian's insight cut deeper than any weapon. Kratos had indeed been measuring each of them. Superman's godlike power, Wonder Woman's divine heritage, Aquaman's command over nature itself. Every instinct screamed that gods with such power would eventually abuse it. Zeus had started as a liberator before becoming a tyrant. Odin had claimed wisdom while manipulating fate itself. Why would these heroes be different? I do not know your world, Kratos admitted. I do not know if your gods are different from mine. But I have learned that power always corrupts, that divinity always breeds tyranny, and that mortals always suffer when gods decide they know what's best. Then perhaps, Wonder Woman said, descending to stand on the water's surface as if it were solid ground. A trick Kratos recognized from Poseidon's own abilities. You should see for yourself before making judgment. You are right that power can corrupt. You are right that gods have used their strength to oppress mortals throughout history. But you are wrong if you think that pattern is inevitable. She extended her hand, not in threat, but in invitation. I am Diana of Themyscira, daughter of Hippolyta and Zeus, trained by the greatest Amazon warriors, blessed by the Olympians you claim to have destroyed. I have lived long enough to see gods fall and heroes rise. I have fought beside mortals who possessed more courage than any deity, and I have opposed divine beings who forgot their purpose. Her eyes met his with warrior's respect. If you truly seek to protect mortals from divine tyranny, then our goals align. But if you simply see all gods as enemies to be destroyed, then you are no different from the tyrants you claim to oppose. The challenge hung in the air, not of combat, but of philosophy. Kratos had spent lifetimes destroying gods. The idea of working alongside them, of trusting that their power wouldn't eventually corrupt them, went against every lesson burned into his soul. But he'd also watched Atreus, his son, struggle with similar questions. The boy had possessed godly power, but mortal compassion. He'd proven that divine strength didn't automatically breed divine cruelty. Perhaps these heroes represented the same possibility Kratos had seen in his son. How do I know you are different? Kratos asked. How do I know you will not become what I've already destroyed? Superman floated down to stand beside Wonder Woman, his feet barely touching the water's surface. You don't, he admitted with startling honesty. We've faced that question ourselves. We've seen versions of us from other realities who became tyrants, who decided that forcing peace was better than earning it, who crossed lines we swore never to cross. His expression darkened with memory. In Justice Superman's fall from hero to dictator, we know the temptation. We feel it every time we could solve a problem with overwhelming force but choose restraint instead. Every time we let criminals escape rather than executing them. Every time we trust humanity to make their own choices, even when we think those choices are wrong. And when you fail, Kratos pressed, when your restraint allows innocence to die, when your trust proves misplaced, then we live with the consequences, Batman answered from above. We accept that protecting free will sometimes means allowing tragedy. Because the alternative, a world where gods dictate every choice, is a prison. For the first time, his voice carried something other than cold calculation. I've fought Superman, prepared contingencies to kill him if necessary. Because I understand your fear. Power like his should terrify anyone who values freedom. But I've also fought beside him for years. And I've learned that what makes him dangerous isn't his power. It's his hope, his belief that people can be better, that humanity doesn't need gods to survive, but allies who stand with them rather than above them. Kratos absorbed this, studying the assembled heroes with new perspective. They were gods, or close enough, but they spoke of limits, of choices, of accepting failure rather than imposing order. It was antithetical to everything Zeus had represented, everything Odin had believed. It was, Kratos realized with uncomfortable clarity, exactly what he'd been trying to teach Atreus before the boom tube had torn them apart. I will observe, he said finally. I will see if your words match your actions. But know this, if you become tyrants, if you use your power to oppress rather than protect, I will end you as I ended Olympus. I have killed gods before. I can do it again. Fair enough, Superman said, extending his hand in the same gesture of peace he'd begun with. But I hope you'll find that we're not the gods you're used to fighting. Kratos didn't take the offered hand. Trust was something earned over years, not granted in moments. But he lowered the Leviathan axe, and the ice spreading across the ocean's surface began to melt. There's one more thing you should know, Cyborg interjected, his technical systems scanning frequencies beyond mortal perception. That boom tube you came through? It's still connected. Faintly, but actively. Someone on Apocalypse is tracking your energy signature. Probably Darkseid himself. Let him come, Kratos said simply. You don't understand, Aquaman warned. Darkseid isn't like the gods. You fought before. He's not capricious or petty. He's methodical, patient. He's been conquering the multiverse for eons, collecting the anti-life equation piece by piece. If he's taken an interest in you, it's because he sees a use for a being who's killed entire pantheons. Kratos had heard similar warnings about Zeus, about Odin, about every god who'd claimed to be unstoppable. They'd all died the same, begging, raging, or accepting their fate with the quiet desperation of beings who'd finally met something they couldn't control. But he'd also learned from his son that pride was its own form of blindness. These heroes had faced Darkseid before and survived. Their warning carried weight earned through experience. Then tell me about this Darkseid, Kratos said, and explain why you believe he's more dangerous than the gods. I've already destroyed. Wonder Woman and Superman exchanged glances, a silent conversation passing between them. Finally, Diana spoke. Because unlike Zeus or Odin, Darkseid doesn't rule through fear or worship. He rules through the systematic elimination of hope itself. He seeks the anti-life equation, mathematical proof that free will is an illusion and that subjugation is the universe's natural state. If he obtains it, every being in existence will kneel before him, not because they're afraid, but because they'll fundamentally believe they deserve to kneel. For the first time since arriving in this strange universe, Kratos felt something close to respect for an enemy he hadn't met. A god who understood that true tyranny wasn't about inspiring fear, but about crushing the very concept of resistance. Zeus had ruled through intimidation, Odin through manipulation. But Darkseid sought something far more insidious, the complete destruction of the will to resist. It was, Kratos realized, exactly what he'd been fighting against his entire existence. The belief that gods were inevitable, that tyranny was natural, that mortals were meant to serve rather than thrive. Then perhaps, Kratos said slowly, we have a common enemy after all. The watchtower hung in Earth's orbit like a steel promise, humanity's declaration that they would stand among the stars as equals, not subjects. Kratos had been transported here via boom tube technology provided by Cyborg's mother box integration, and he'd spent the journey analyzing how similar yet fundamentally different this felt from Apocalypse's brutal dimensional tears. The new gods had created tools of connection. Darkseid had perverted them into weapons of invasion. The observation deck offered a view of Earth spinning below, blue and green and impossibly fragile. Kratos stood before the viewport, seeing not the planet but memories of civilizations he'd watched burn. Greece consumed by the death of its gods. The Nine Realms fracturing as Ragnarok approached. Everywhere divine power touched, mortals paid the price. Beautiful, isn't it? Superman's reflection appeared in the glass beside his own. The Kryptonian hadn't approached with stealth, he'd simply moved, quietly out of respect, giving Kratos space before joining him. I grew up down there. Kansas, specifically. Farmland as far as you could see. People who worked the earth and trusted in each other more than any god. His expression softened with memory. My parents found me in a spacecraft. Alien technology that should have terrified them. Instead, they saw a child who needed a home. You were not born human, Kratos observed. No, I'm Kryptonian, last son of a dead world called Krypton. Under Earth's yellow sun, I have power that makes me essentially a god by mortal standards. Superman turned to face him directly. I can hear heartbeats from continents away. I can see through matter, move faster than bullets, bench press planets if needed. For years, I struggled with what that meant. Was I humanity's protector or their replacement? Their hope or their chain? Kratos understood that struggle intimately. What answer did you find? That power doesn't define purpose. Choices do. My father, Jor-El, sent me here with a message that I could be a bridge between worlds, a symbol of what's possible when strength serves rather than rules. Superman's jaw tightened. But I've also seen what I could become. There's a timeline, the Injustice universe, where I lost everything I loved, where the Joker tricked me into killing Lois and my unborn child, destroying Metropolis in the process. In that reality, I decided that Earth needed order more than freedom, that I should rule rather than inspire. And you became a tyrant, Kratos finished. Yes. The admission came without hesitation or excuse. I killed criminals without trial. I established a regime that brought peace through fear. I convinced myself it was necessary, that I was protecting humanity from itself. Batman led an insurgency against me, and we fought a war that devastated the planet I'd sworn to protect. Superman's eyes glowed faintly red, not with heat vision, but with emotion barely restrained. That version of me is still out there, still convinced his tyranny is justified. And every day, I have to choose not to become him. Every time I let a criminal escape, every time I trust humanity to solve its own problems, I'm choosing hope over control. The vulnerability in the confession surprised Kratos. Gods didn't admit weakness. They didn't question their right to rule. Yet here stood perhaps the most powerful being on earth, acknowledging that his greatest enemy was himself. Why tell me this? Kratos asked. Because you've killed gods who became exactly what you feared I might become. Superman answered. And because if I ever cross that line, I need people around me willing to stop me. Batman has plans. Wonder Woman has her warrior's code. But you? You have experience ending divine tyranny. Permanently. He met Kratos's gaze without flinching. I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm asking you to judge me by my actions. And if I fail, if I become the tyrant that universe created, I'm asking you to do what you've done before, in the threat. It was the last thing Kratos had expected from a god being. Permission to be executioner. An acknowledgement that power required accountability. Even, especially, from those who wielded it righteously. Before he could respond, alarms shrieked throughout the watchtower. Batman's voice cut through the chaos with surgical precision. Boom tube signatures. Multiple. Apocalypse origin. They're opening above major population centers, Metropolis, Gotham, Central City, Coast City, Washington, D.C. A pause. This isn't an invasion force. The energy signatures are too controlled. Darkseid is sending ambassadors. Ambassadors? Wonder Woman's voice carried disbelief as she entered the observation. Deck at combat speed. Golden lasso already in hand. Darkseid doesn't negotiate. He conquers. He does when he wants something he can't simply take. Batman corrected, his image appearing on the central view screen. The cowled detective stood in the Batcave, surrounded by holographic displays analyzing the boom tube signatures. And based on the targeting precision, he wants Kratos. This is a recruitment pitch. Kratos' hand found the Leviathan axe instinctively. I will not serve another god. He knows that, Batman said, his eyes narrowing behind the cowl. Which means he's not offering servitude. He's offering something else. Power, revenge, purpose, whatever he thinks will manipulate you into cooperation. The detective's gaze fixed on Kratos. Through the screen. You need to understand something about Darkseid. He doesn't just conquer planets. He conquers souls. He finds what you want most and offers it to you wrapped in logic so compelling that you convince yourself serving him is your choice. Then I will refuse him. Kratos said simply. It won't be that simple, Wonder Woman warned. I've faced his furies before. Granny Goodness can twist minds with words alone. Darkseid feeds on pain and doubt. And if Darkseid himself has taken personal interest, she let the sentence hang. But Kratos understood the implication. Let him come, Kratos repeated. I have refused gods before. Not gods like this, Superman said quietly. Zeus ruled through intimidation and power. Darkseid rules through inevitability. When you face him, he won't threaten you. He'll show you that resistance is mathematically impossible. That free will is the lie we tell ourselves to justify suffering. That peace through subjugation is the universe's natural state. And he'll use your past against you, Batman added. Every god you've killed, every innocent who died in your war against Olympus, every moment you've questioned whether destroying divine tyranny was worth the cost. He'll weaponize it all. Kratos absorbed their warnings. But he'd heard similar cautions about Zeus's lightning, about Odin's wisdom, about every god who claimed inevitability. They'd all fallen to a weapon they'd underestimated. Mortal determination refined by divine rage. The boom tube opened on the observation deck without warning, not an invasion, but a doorway. Through it stepped a figure that made even Superman tense. She stood 7 feet tall, her skin pale as death, her eyes burning with fanatical devotion. Granny Goodness, ancient beyond measure, had broken civilizations with her care. Behind her walked Darkseid, Darkseid's torturer, his smile promising pain disguised as enlightenment. And between them, projected as a hologram but radiating presence that bent reality around itself, appeared Darkseid. The Lord of Apocalypse didn't need to physically manifest to dominate a room. His image alone, stone-gray skin, eyes burning with Omega effect, carried the weight of eons spent conquering the multiverse. When he spoke, his voice resonated with the finality of mathematics, the cold certainty of entropy itself. Kratos of Sparta, ghost of Olympus, God-killer. Darkseid's greeting carried no warmth, no threat, only acknowledgement of fact. I have watched you tear through my parademons. I have seen you match Orion, my son, blow for blow. I have witnessed your arrival in this universe and calculated 73 possible uses for your unique talents. His burning eyes fixed on Kratos, with the intensity of a star collapsing. You impress me. Few beings in the multiverse can make that claim. I seek no god's approval, Kratos replied. Good. Darkseid's expression might have been a smile of something, capable of feeling amusement. I do not offer approval. I offer understanding. You destroyed Olympus because Zeus and his pantheon treated mortals as toys. You ended the Norse gods because Odin manipulated fate itself. You are a god-killer because you recognize that divinity inevitably breeds tyranny. He gestured at Superman, at Wonder Woman, at the assembled Justice League. And now you stand among new gods, telling yourself they are different, wondering if perhaps this time, divine power will not corrupt. They have proven themselves through action, Kratos said, though doubt crept into his voice despite himself. Have they? Darkseid's hologram moved closer, reality bending around it. Superman claims to protect free will. Yet how many times has he used his power to override human choice? How many criminals has he captured and imprisoned without trial, trusting his judgment over mortal justice? Wonder Woman carries weapons forged by gods who treated humanity as entertainment. Batman, the mortal among them, has contingency plans to kill his allies because even he recognizes that power corrupts inevitably. That proves they understand the danger. Superman interjected, his voice steady despite the tension radiating from him. We hold ourselves accountable. You hold yourselves accountable to no one, Darkseid corrected. The Justice League answers to no government, no oversight, no authority beyond your own judgment. You are gods playing at being heroes, convinced that your good intentions justify your dominion over lesser beings. His attention returned to Kratos. You see this. You know this. Every instinct honed through centuries of god-killing screams that these beings are no different from Zeus or Odin. They simply hide their tyranny behind symbols and hope. The words struck deeper than Kratos wanted to admit. He'd been watching the Justice League, measuring them against every god he'd destroyed, and finding uncomfortable similarities. They wielded godlike power. They made decisions that affected billions. They trusted their own judgment to determine right from wrong. What made them different from Olympus beyond better intentions? I offer you an alternative, Darkseid continued. Not servitude, not worship, but purpose. Join me in ending the chaos of free will, the suffering caused by allowing beings to make wrong choices. The anti-life equation proves mathematically that subjugation is the natural state of existence, that peace comes through order, that the greatest mercy is eliminating the burden of choice itself. You speak of slavery, Wonder Woman said, her hand on her lasso. I speak of inevitability, Darkseid corrected. Kratos understands this. He has seen civilizations crumble under the weight of divine capriciousness. He has watched mortals suffer because gods refuse to impose order. I offer him what he has always sought, an end to divine tyranny through the systematic elimination of gods themselves. Kratos' hands tightened on his weapons. You are a god. You seek to rule absolutely. How is this different from Zeus? Because I do not hide behind benevolence, Darkseid answered with brutal honesty. Zeus claimed to protect humanity while pursuing his own pleasures. These heroes claim to inspire hope while making decisions that should belong to mortals. I make no such claims. I seek dominion because dominion is the universe's truth. Free will is the lie that causes suffering. I would end that lie permanently. And in doing so, you would end what makes mortals worth protecting, Kratos said, the words coming from somewhere deeper than conscious thought. My son, Atreus, possessed godly power but mortal heart. He made mistakes. He suffered. He doubted. And through that struggle, he became something greater than any god I've known. You would steal that from every being in existence. Your son, Darkseid repeated. And suddenly his hologram's expression shifted, not to mockery, but to something almost resembling sympathy. Separated from you by the dimensional breach. Lost in the Norse realms while you wander this strange universe. I could reunite you. My boom tube technology spans the multiverse. I could bring Atrus here, or send you home. He paused, letting the offer sink in. All I ask in return is your cooperation. Help me prove to these heroes that their model of protection is unsustainable. Show them what happens when gods refuse to admit they are gods. The temptation was a knife in Kratos' chest. Atrus, his son, lost, possibly in danger, possibly believing his father had abandoned him again. The chance to return home, to resume the responsibility he'd been torn away from. It was everything Kratos wanted. And that's exactly why it was a trap. No, the word came out with finality that surprised even Kratos himself. I have made that mistake before. I have accepted a god's offer. Worn their chains willingly because they promised me what I wanted. Ares promised me victory. Zeus promised me redemption. Odin promised me answers. His eyes met, Darkseid's burning gaze without flinching. They all lied, and I will not make that choice again, no matter the cost. Darkseid's expression didn't change, but something in his posture suggested satisfaction rather than disappointment. Then you have passed my test. Test. Superman moved forward, heat vision threatening at the edges of his eyes. I had to know if the God Killer could be bought, Darkseid explained. If sentiment would override principle. It will not. His attention fixed on Kratos with something approaching respect. You are what I calculated you to be, a weapon that cannot be wielded, only pointed and released, which makes you useless to me and dangerous to keep alive. Granny Goodness and Desod moved with practiced synchronization. Their mother box is activating. The boom tube behind them expanded, and through it poured not parademons, but something. Worse, Darkseid's elite. Kalibak, still furious from their previous encounter. The female Furies in full combat formation, and descending from the boom tube's apex, Orion himself. His expression twisted with the rage he'd been containing. My son, Darkseid addressed Orion without looking at him. You will kill the God Killer. Prove your loyalty to Apocalypse, or prove you are weak. Orion's eyes met Kratos's, and in that moment, the ghost of Sparta saw the same trap he'd lived through, a son forced to choose between his father's tyranny and his own conscience. The same choice that had driven Kratos to destroy Olympus. Father, Orion said slowly, his Astro Force weapon charging. I have proven my loyalty 1,000 times. But I will not murder a warrior who fights against divine tyranny simply because you command it. Then you have chosen weakness, Darkseid said without emotion. Kalibak, kill them both. Darkseid's firstborn son roared with bestial enthusiasm, his beta club swinging toward Kratos and Orion simultaneously. The ghost of Sparta and the godborn warrior moved in perfect synchronization, diving aside as the weapon pulverized the watchtower's deck. Alarms shrieked as atmosphere began venting into space. The Justice League moved to contain the breach, but Darkseid's forces were already engaging them. The female Furies targeted Wonder Woman, recognizing her as the greatest threat. Granny Goodness opened boom tubes beneath Superman's feet, trying to dump him into Apocalypse's fire pits. Desod's torture devices sought Batman's mind through the Watchtower's systems, attempting to digitize and dissect the world's greatest detective. And in the center of the chaos, Kratos and Orion stood back to back against Kalibak's overwhelming strength. I suppose we're allies now, Orion said, deflecting a blow that would have shattered planets. Until your father is dead, Kratos confirmed. The blades of chaos igniting with hellfire that burned even in the vacuum of space. I've been trying to kill him for centuries, Orion admitted. Perhaps a god killer can teach me how. Kratos smiled, and it was the expression of someone who'd finally found purpose again. Perhaps I can. The watchtowers. Hull breached in 3 more locations as Kalibak's rage-fueled rampage tore through reinforced steel like parchment. Superman moved faster than thought, his heat vision welding emergency bulkheads into place, while his body blocked debris from striking the League's support staff. But even Kryptonian speed had limits when facing new god brutality designed to shatter worlds. Kratos didn't have Superman's speed or his concern for collateral damage. He had something else, centuries, of fighting opponents stronger than himself and winning. Through sheer refusal to die, the Leviathan axe traced an arc through zero gravity, frost crystallizing the air that remained in the observation deck. Kalibak caught it on his beta club, but the impact sent both combatants spinning in opposite directions. In the vacuum of space, momentum was everything. Kratos used the spin, twisting mid-rotation to hurl the blades of chaos. The chains extended impossibly far, wrapping around a structural beam, and he pulled himself back toward Kalibak with acceleration that would have liquefied a mortal's organs. His boots connected with Darkseid's son's jaw with the force of a battering ram blessed by divine fury. Kalibak's head snapped back, purple blood crystallizing instantly in the vacuum. He roared, a sound that shouldn't have carried without atmosphere, but somehow did, vibrating through the watchtower's remaining structure. His beta club swung in a wide arc, and Kratos barely managed to raise both forearms in time. The impact shattered the deck beneath them and sent the ghost of Sparta hurtling through two bulkheads. He crashed into the medical bay, alarms screaming around him. Through the ringing in his ears, he heard Cyborg's voice over the station's failing intercom. Hull integrity at 40%. We need to evacuate or we're all breathing vacuum in 90 seconds. Not yet. Batman's voice cut through with absolute certainty. Darkseid wants us to flee, wants us to abandon the watchtower so he can claim it, study our technology, use our own surveillance systems against Earth. We hold. Kratos pushed himself to his feet, tasting blood. Kalibak was already coming through the hole he'd created, unstoppable as entropy itself. But Orion intercepted him, Astroforce meeting Beta Club in an explosion that lit up the vacuum. Like a newborn sun, the two sons of Darkseid, one raised in tyranny, one raised in light, collided with the fury of a civil war that had been brewing for eons. Go, Orion commanded. His voice carried through Mother Box technology directly into Kratos' mind. I can hold Kalibak. You need to reach my father before he completes whatever he's actually planning. This invasion, it's a distraction. Kratos understood immediately. Darkseid didn't need to invade the watchtower. He could have sent entire armies. This personal appearance, the calculated insults, the offer and refusal, all of it was theater, designed to keep the Justice League focused on the wrong threat. What is he planning? Kratos demanded. But Orion was already lost in combat with his monstrous half-brother. The two of them tearing through the watchtower like titans reshaping reality. Wonder Woman had her answer. She appeared beside Kratos in a blur of motion, golden lasso glowing. Her face streaked with blood from where Lashina's whips had found their mark. Boom tube signatures. Dozens of them. Opening across Earth. Not invasion forces, extraction teams. Darkseid is using this fight as cover to kidnap scientists, engineers, anyone with knowledge of Mother Box technology. Integration. Her eyes blazed with warrior's fury. He's not trying to conquer Earth. He's trying to steal the people who could help defend against him. The strategy was brutally efficient. While the Justice League fought his elite forces, Darkseid collected the mortals who represented Earth's future defense capability. He wouldn't rule a population that would resist. He'd simply remove their capacity to resist, one genius at a time. Then we end this now, Kratos said, the Leviathan axe returning to his hand. Where is Darkseid? Still on Apocalypse, Cyborg's voice came through. His systems tracking the holographic projection's origin point. He's never been here physically. That's just an avatar. He's fighting us from his throne room across dimensional space. Completely safe while we tear ourselves apart. Then I go to him. Kratos stated simply. That's suicide, Superman said, appearing with Flash in tow. The speedster had been running through the watchtower at near light speed, patching breaches faster than they could form. Both heroes looked exhausted. Even gods had limits when fighting on multiple fronts simultaneously. Apocalypse is his domain. His power there is absolute. Even I've nearly died fighting him on his home ground. I have walked into God's domains before, Kratos said, already moving toward the boom tube granny. Goodness had left open, the one Darkseid's forces had poured through. Olympus, Helheim, Asgard. They all believed themselves invincible. In their own realms. They all died anyway. Batman's voice cut through with tactical precision. If you're going, you don't go alone. Darkseid expects that. Expects the legendary God Killer to march into his throne room for single combat while Earth burns. A pause. Wonder Woman, Cyborg, Martian Manhunter, you go with him. Superman, Flash, Green Lantern stay here with me. We handle the extraction teams and keep the watchtower from becoming debris. Batman, Superman started to protest. It's the right call, Wonder Woman interrupted. Landing beside Kratos with her sword drawn, not the one blessed by Olympians, but the God-Killer blade forged specifically to end divine tyranny. Kratos has experience ending gods. We have experience fighting Darkseid. Combined, we might actually survive this. Cyborg's mechanical eye glowed as he analyzed the boom tube's stability. I can keep it open, but only for 30 seconds. After that, Darkseid will realize we're coming and collapse it. We'll be trapped on Apocalypse with no way home unless I can hack their motherbox network from inside. 30 seconds is more than enough time to fall into hell, Kratos observed, stepping toward the dimensional tear without hesitation. Martian Manhunter phased through the watchtower's wall, his telepathic presence washing over Kratos like cold water. I have touched your mind, warrior. I've seen what you've survived, what you've destroyed, what you've lost. You carry oceans of rage, mountains of guilt, and a sliver of hope so deeply buried you've forgotten it exists. The Martian's red eyes met his without judgment. If we're about to invade Apocalypse itself, I need to know, are you seeking justice? Or are you seeking death? The question cut through every rationalization, every justification, every warrior's pride. Kratos had walked into impossible battles before, always emerging victorious, but never whole. He'd survived Olympus's fall, but at what cost? His family, his humanity, his peace. Perhaps some part of him had been seeking death for centuries, disguising suicide as heroism. I seek an end to tyranny, Kratos answered, the words coming from somewhere honest. If that requires my death, so be it. But I will not die alone. Darkseid will die with me. Wonder Woman's hand fell on his shoulder, not restraining, but steadying. Then we fight together, not as gods, not as mortals, but as warriors who understand that some evils cannot be negotiated with or redeemed. They can only be ended. The four of them stood before the boom tube, God Killer, Amazon Princess, cybernetic bridge between human and new god, and Martian telepath. They represented everything Darkseid claimed to despise: free will, individual choice, the belief that beings could choose heroism over dominion. For what it's worth, Cyborg said as his mother box technology interfaced with the boom tube, stabilizing its chaotic energies, you're the craziest son of a bitch I've ever met. And I've met Superman. Compliments later, Kratos said, stepping through the dimensional tear. Revenge now. The transition was instantaneous and agonizing. The boom tube didn't simply transport bodies, it translated them across dimensional barriers that weren't meant to be crossed. For a fraction of a second, Kratos existed in all places simultaneously, his consciousness scattered across the multiverse. He saw versions of himself in countless realities, some still enslaved to Ares, some successful in saving his family, some who'd never escaped the cycle of violence. And in one terrible moment, he saw a version of himself sitting on a throne identical to Darkseid's, ruling through the same tyrannical certainty he'd spent lifetimes opposing. Then the boom tube spat them onto Apocalypse, and there was no more time for existential horror. They materialized in the throne room itself. Cyborgs. Hacking had bypassed Darkseid's security and deposited them directly before the Lord of Apocalypse. The chamber was vast beyond mortal comprehension, its walls carved with the history of conquered civilizations, its floor made from compressed bones of worlds that had resisted. At the chamber's center, on a throne built from the remains of the old gods, sat Darkseid. He wasn't projecting anymore. This was the genuine article, 15 feet of living stone, eyes burning with the Omega effect, presence so overwhelming that reality itself bent around him. Behind him stood his remaining Furies, his elite forces, and something worse, the anti-life equation chamber, a massive construct pulsing with mathematical certainty. That free will was illusion. Impressive, Darkseid said, his voice shaking the throne room. You hacked my boom tubes, invaded my domain, and brought the God Killer directly to me. Either you are tactically brilliant or functionally suicidal. Both, Wonder Woman said, her god-killer blade igniting with divine fire. We're done with your games, Darkseid. The kidnapping stop now. Your invasion attempts stop now. And if we have to tear Apocalypse apart to make that happen, we will. You have already lost, Darkseid stated with the finality of mathematics. While your Justice League fights my elite, while you stand here in my throne room believing yourselves heroes, my extraction teams have collected 47 Earth scientists. They are being processed even now. Their knowledge of dimensional technology, extracted and integrated into my pursuit of the anti-life equation. Then we'll get them back, Cyborg said. His system's already reaching out, trying to interface with Apocalypse's networks. But the moment his consciousness touched the planet's infrastructure, he gasped, oh no, this is a trap, Darkseid confirmed. The moment your mother box technology interfaced with mine, I gained access to your cybernetic systems. And through you, the Watchtower's defensive grids, Earth's satellite network, everything. Cyborg screamed as code invaded his consciousness, rewriting his protocols, turning him from hero to weapon. His arm cannon swiveled toward Wonder Woman, charging with enough energy to pierce even Amazon durability. Martian Manhunter moved instantly, his telepathic assault hitting Cyborg's mind like a battering ram. The two of them collapsed, locked in psychic combat as John Johns fought to free his teammate from Darkseid's digital corruption while simultaneously preventing him from firing, which left Kratos and Wonder Woman facing Darkseid and his assembled forces alone. You cannot win, Darkseid said, rising from his throne. I have calculated every possible outcome of this confrontation. In 72% of timelines, you die within minutes. In 26%, you survive but fail to stop my plans. In the remaining 2%, you achieve some Pyrrhic victory that ultimately serves my purposes. His eyes blazed brighter. There is no scenario where you triumph completely. The mathematics are absolute. Mathematics, Kratos said, walking forward despite every instinct screaming retreat, do not account for will. Will is the greatest lie ever told, Darkseid countered. You believe your choices matter, because accepting otherwise would shatter your identity. But I have seen across the multiverse, watched countless versions of every being make the same decisions under the same conditions. Free will is pattern recognition mistaken for agency. And I will prove this by showing you what you truly are. Darkseid's Omega beams lanced from his eyes, not to kill, but to show truth. The energy struck Kratos and Wonder Woman simultaneously, and suddenly they weren't standing in the throne room. They were experiencing every version of themselves across the multiverse. Diana saw herself as Darkseid's general, convinced that tyranny protected mortals better than freedom. She saw herself broken and enslaved, her warrior's spirit crushed. She saw herself watching Steve Trevor die again and again, each death confirming that mortals were too fragile to be left to their own choices. Kratos saw himself in timelines where he'd accepted Ares' power and became god of war, ruling Sparta through blood. He saw himself accept Zeus's mercy and spend eternity in chains. He saw himself find Atreus but teach his son the wrong lessons, creating another god-killer who'd eventually turn that blade against his father. In timeline after timeline, he saw himself fail, not through lack of strength, but through inability to escape the cycle of violence gods represented. This is what the multiverse teaches. Darkseid's voice echoed through their visions. That choice is illusion. That you are trapped in patterns determined by your nature. That the only variable is whether you accept this truth voluntarily or have it forced upon you. Wonder Woman screamed, not in pain but in denial, as her warriors will fought against the mathematical proof of predestination. Her lasso, the lasso of truth, blazed golden, and suddenly she was pulling truth from a different source. Not Darkseid's calculations, but the fundamental truth that had driven her since birth. That every choice mattered precisely because the outcome was uncertain. You're wrong, she gasped, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd lived millennia without compromising her ideals. I've seen darkness. I've been tempted by tyranny. I've questioned whether mortals deserve freedom. But in every moment of doubt, I chose to believe in them anyway. Not because mathematics proved it correct, but because hope is a choice we make despite the odds. Her lasso extended, wrapping around Darkseid's arm. And suddenly the Lord of Apocalypse was experiencing her truth. The centuries of fighting for beings who would never match her power. The constant choice to show mercy rather than dominion. The exhausting burden of being a god who refused to act like one. Darkseid's expression flickered, not with doubt, but with something almost like recognition. "You are Atlas," he said, holding up a sky that mortals should learn to support themselves. "Your heroism is their crutch. Your mercy is their weakness. And when you inevitably fall, they will be helpless." "Then I won't fall," Wonder Woman said simply. But Kratos barely heard the exchange. He was lost in his own visions, drowning in timelines where every choice led to tragedy. In some, he saved his family but Sparta fell. In others, he overthrew the gods but became worse than them. In one horrifying possibility, he found Atreus only to watch his son die because Kratos had taught him to fight gods without teaching him to value his own life. The visions should have broken him. They were designed to show that all his struggle, all his god-killing, all his rage had been meaningless, that he was trapped in patterns he couldn't escape. Instead, they reminded him of something Atreus had said before they'd been separated. "We choose to be better. Not, we are better. Not, we're different from the gods." But a choice, made continuously, despite every reason to surrender to darkness. His son had understood what Kratos had forgotten, that the pattern mattered less than the decision to break it. Kratos' eyes opened, and the Omega Effect's visions shattered like glass. "You have calculated everything," Kratos said, advancing on Darkseid. Despite the burning in his skull where the Omega beams had torn through his mind. "You have measured timelines, predicted outcomes, reduced existence to mathematics. But you made one mistake." "Impossible," Darkseid stated. "My calculations are." "Your calculations assume beings act according to their nature," Kratos interrupted. The blades of chaos igniting with hellfire that burned, hotter than it ever had before, fueled not just by rage, but by choice. "That gods will always rule. That warriors will always fight. That I will always be the ghost of Sparta, forever trapped in cycles of vengeance." He raised the Leviathan axe, frost spreading across Apocalypse's throne room floor. "But I am not trapped by my past. I carry it. I learn from it. And I choose, every day, not to become what the gods I killed represented." "That is sentiment," Darkseid dismissed. "Emotional reasoning that." Kratos threw the Leviathan axe, not at Darkseid, at the anti-life equation chamber behind him. The weapon struck true, divine frost meeting mathematical certainty. For a moment, nothing happened. Then cracks appeared in the chamber's surface, not physical cracks, but conceptual ones. The anti-life equation was designed to prove that free will didn't exist, that subjugation was natural, that hope was delusion. But Kratos' weapon carried something the equation couldn't account for: the lived experience of a being who had defied mathematical probability countless times, who had survived when death was certain, who had overthrown gods when victory was impossible, who had chosen to be better when every calculation said he should become worse. The anti-life equation chamber shattered. The explosion wasn't physical, it was ontological. Concepts imploded. Certainties became questions. And for one terrible moment, Apocalypse itself, a planet sustained by absolute conviction in Darkseid's vision, trembled. As doubt entered its foundation, Darkseid roared, and the sound carried the rage of a being who'd spent eons building certainty only to have it fractured by a mortal's choice. His Omega beams lanced out, not the calculated strikes from before, but wild, furious destruction aimed at erasing Kratos from existence across all timelines simultaneously. Wonder Woman's shield intercepted them. The divine artifact, forged by Hephaestus himself, blessed by gods. Kratos had killed, caught the Omega effect and reflected it back toward its source. Darkseid twisted, the beams scorching his stone flesh but not stopping him. Then Cyborg screamed, his consciousness finally breaking free of Darkseid's control. His arm cannon fired, not at his allies, but at the throne room's primary boom tube generator. The technology exploded, severing Apocalypse's connection to Earth. "Got them," Cyborg gasped, data streaming through his cybernetic consciousness. "The scientists found them, boom tubing them back to Earth now. All of them." Martian Manhunter's telepathic presence expanded. touching every mind on Apocalypse. The enslaved workers, the broken civilizations, the beings who'd forgotten they'd ever been free. He couldn't free them all. Darkseid's indoctrination ran too deep. But he could plant seeds, thoughts, questions, the beginning of doubt in a realm built on absolute certainty. Darkseid stood in his throne room, his anti-life equation chamber shattered, his boom tube network hijacked, his invasion forces recalled, his certainty fractured by beings who'd chosen to hope despite every mathematical proof that hope was irrational. "This changes nothing," he said, but for the first time, his voice carried something other than absolute conviction. "I am inevitable. I am." "You are a god," Kratos said, walking forward with weapons raised. "Who has forgotten that gods die?" He didn't kill Darkseid. That would have been impossible. The Lord of Apocalypse was too powerful, too essential to his planet's existence, too fundamental to the universe's current balance. Killing him would have required power Kratos no longer possessed, and would have created power vacuums that spawned worse tyrannies. But Kratos didn't need to kill Darkseid. He just needed to prove that certainty was a lie, that even the Lord of Apocalypse could be defied. That free will, however messy and imperfect, was real enough to shatter mathematical proof of its impossibility. Wonder Woman's lasso wrapped around Darkseid's throat, not to kill, but to bind, to force him to speak truth. "What are you?" she demanded. And for the first time in eons, Darkseid spoke words he'd never admitted. "I am uncertain." The admission shook Apocalypse to its core. Boom tubes across the planet destabilized. The enslaved workers paused in their eternal labor. And in distant corners of the multiverse, beings who'd given up hope felt something stir, the recognition that if even Darkseid could be made uncertain, then perhaps nothing was truly inevitable. Cyborg activated his emergency boom tube, pulling the four heroes back toward Earth as Apocalypse's defenses finally responded to the invasion. Parademons swarmed. The Furies rallied. Darkseid's rage manifested as Omega, effect storms that tore through dimensional space. But the heroes were already gone, leaving behind only a shattered anti-life chamber and a tyrant who'd been reminded that he wasn't as inevitable as his mathematics claimed. They materialized on the Watchtower to find the Justice League victorious but exhausted. The extraction teams had been recalled. The kidnapped scientists were safe, and Superman stood in the observation deck, watching Apocalypse through the viewport with eyes that had seen too much. "Did you kill him?" Superman asked quietly. "No," Kratos answered, equally quiet. "I did something worse. I made him doubt." Wonder Woman collapsed against a bulkhead, her armor scorched. Her god-killer blade dulled from channeling energies it wasn't designed to contain. "He'll recover," she said tiredly. "Darkseid always does. He'll rebuild his certainty, reconstruct his anti-life research, and come for us again." "Let him come," Kratos said, staring out at the Earth spinning below, so fragile, so persistent, so impossibly determined to survive despite gods and tyrants and mathematical proof of its insignificance. "I have learned something today." "What?" Batman's voice came through the comms. The Dark Knight already analyzing their mission data, cataloging everything they'd learned about Apocalypse's defenses for future reference. "That hope is not delusion," Kratos said slowly. The words difficult but necessary. "That choosing to believe beings can be better, choosing to fight for that belief despite all evidence. Otherwise is not weakness." He looked at Superman, at Wonder Woman, at the Justice League who'd proven themselves different from the gods he'd destroyed. "You are gods who choose to be mortals. I was a mortal who became a god. Perhaps that is the difference that matters." Superman extended his hand again, the same gesture of peace he'd offered when they'd first met. This time, Kratos took it. "Welcome to Earth," Superman said with a smile that carried genuine warmth. "Where we're all just making it up as we go along and hoping we don't destroy everything by accident." "That," Kratos said, allowing himself the smallest smile in decades, "sounds exactly like the kind of chaos gods fear most." In the distance, across dimensional barriers and cosmic distances, Darkseid sat on his throne and stared at the shattered remains of his anti-life equation chamber. The God-Killer had broken it, not through superior power or better mathematics, but through the simple, irrational choice to believe that choices mattered. It was the first time in eons that Darkseid had encountered something his calculations couldn't predict. And despite himself, despite everything he represented, the Lord of Apocalypse felt something. He'd eliminated from his being, millennia ago, curiosity. If the God-Killer could choose to defy destiny, if mortals could build societies that survived despite chaos, if hope could persist despite mathematical proof of its irrationality, then perhaps the anti-life equation wasn't the universe's final truth after all. Perhaps there was something beyond certainty, something that even Darkseid, in all his power and ancient knowledge, had forgotten to calculate. The equation would need to be rebuilt. The calculations would need to account for this new variable, this irrational, impossible, persistent phenomenon called hope. And for the first time in longer than civilizations had existed, Darkseid looked forward to the challenge. Kratos stood in the Watchtower's observation deck long after the others had left to rest and recover. Earth spun below him, blue and green and impossibly alive. Somewhere on that planet, civilizations rose and fell without divine intervention. Mortals made choices, good and bad, wise and foolish, without gods dictating their fates. It was everything Olympus hadn't been, everything the Nine Realms had failed to achieve. Batman approached silently, though Kratos had heard him coming. The Dark Knight rarely made noise unless he wanted to be heard. Contingency plans? Kratos asked without looking away from Earth. Already written, Batman confirmed. 3 ways to contain you if you go rogue. 5 ways to kill you if containment fails. 2 methods that might even work. A pause. But I deleted them. That made Kratos turn. Why? Because you don't need oversight, Batman said simply. You need purpose. And watching you fight Darkseid. Watching you shatter the anti-life equation, not with superior power, but with sheer refusal to accept that your choices don't matter. I realized something. He looked directly at Kratos, and his eyes behind the cowl carried the weight of someone who'd spent years fighting gods as a mortal. You're not dangerous because you kill gods. You're dangerous because you refuse to become one. And that makes you more necessary than any contingency plan I could write. Wonder Woman appeared, freshly armored, her wounds already healing through Amazon physiology. The Council of the Gods, what remains of them, has taken notice. They want to know if the God-Killer represents a threat to all divine beings. And what did you tell them? Kratos asked. That you represent a threat only to gods who forget they serve mortals, rather than rule them. Diana answered with a warrior's smile. They were unsatisfied with that answer, but they'll learn. Superman joined them, floating through the observation deck's entrance with 2 cups of coffee, one for Batman, one for himself. He offered Kratos water instead, remembering the warrior's preference for simplicity. We've been talking, he said carefully. The League. About whether to offer you membership. I am not a hero, Kratos said immediately. No, Superman agreed. You're something older. Something that existed before we divided the world into heroes and villains, gods and mortals, hope and despair. You're a reminder that power requires responsibility, that divinity doesn't excuse tyranny, and that sometimes the greatest act of heroism is simply choosing not to become what you're capable of becoming. He met Kratos' eyes with understanding, born from personal struggle. You don't have to join the Justice League, but Earth could use someone who remembers what gods become when mortals stop holding them accountable. Kratos looked at each of them. Batman, who fought gods as a mortal. Superman, who fought as a god with mortal compassion. Wonder Woman, who bridged both worlds with warrior's wisdom. They represented something he'd thought impossible. Divine power wielded with mortal restraint. I will stay, Kratos said finally. Not as a member, not as a hero, but as a reminder, a warning, and if necessary, if you become what I have destroyed before, as an ending. Fair enough, Batman said, allowing himself the smallest smile. I wouldn't trust anyone who wasn't willing to stop us if we crossed the line. Somewhere across dimensional barriers, Atreus felt his father's presence, distant but alive, choosing once again to be better rather than simply being powerful. The boy smiled, understanding that his father had finally found what they'd both been seeking, a world where gods and mortals could coexist because the gods chose compassion over dominion. On Apocalypse, Darkseid began rebuilding the anti-life equation chamber. but this time with new variables. Hope, choice, the irrational belief that free will mattered. It would take millennia to incorporate these factors into his calculations. He had time, and across Earth, in cities and towns, in moments of crisis and moments of peace, mortals continued making choices that defied mathematical prediction. They chose to help strangers. They chose to resist tyranny. They chose to hope despite evidence that hope was irrational. They chose, every day, to prove that the universe belonged to those who refused to accept inevitability. And in the Watchtower, the ghost of Sparta, god-killer, father, warrior, and reluctant reminder of what power should never become, stood watch over a world where gods had learned to kneel before the choices of mortals. It was, he thought, exactly the kind of impossible victory that made defying destiny worthwhile.